Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Maps Are Dead. I am Mike D, and we're here because the old roadmaps for life and business kind of run out. And so if you're not navigating from the inside out from your own compass, easy to get lost. Today's guest is someone who she doesn't just navigate, but she basically builds infrastructure and consults and advises entire organizations on how they need to set their own compass or even find a map that kind of overlaps that compass. Sarah Hassaine, she has been the global head of inclusion, diversity for companies like ResMed and corporate social responsibility. Sarah, you have worked in all kinds of different projects across, I was actually looking at your bio and it said something like you've advised for like the Navy. I think Amazon was in there. You did some Qualcomm work. You have a TEDx talk that's very popular. And so I was really excited that you'd be willing to join us. Our friend Danny connected us. You're in San Diego, is that right?
Yes. America's finest.
Yes. America's finest, the finest city, America's finest. I was like that. Except that sign on the building downtown. It was America's finest city for years. I was down there for a long time. Danny connected us, and we're going to talk about kind of all the things that you're currently consulting after 5 years at ResMed. Is that right?
Yeah, I was 5 years at ResMed, 5 years at Qualcomm before that.
Okay, so you're not a hit and run person. You actually come in and work jobs. Like 5 years is a lot these days. It seems like
nowadays it is.
Really?
A lot of people, wow, you're there for a long time. It's funny because
Totally.
previous generations stay, and now people don't stay. So.
I was like, ResMed. I'm like, wait a minute, is that the CPAP people? Aren't they like the CPAP machines you see in TSA security lines going through?
Yeah, so
airports?
true. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I've got, for those of you watching, you can see on the board behind me, I've got Sarah's Clifton and Strengths Top 5. We got woo, responsibility, input, strategic, and analytical. So there's some really fascinating pieces of Sarah's profile that we'll talk a little bit about because that there's a connection. We've got the influencing themes of like a woo, but we also have like the deep thinking themes of input, strategic, and analytical with hardworking loyalty machine of responsibility tossed in. So we'll talk through some of these strengths. Sarah, how do you go from, I always like to say to people, the leadoff question is, in your life where you are right now, up until this point, when you think about a question that you had to answer, where there was no right answer and no one could tell you what to do, that you think shaped the course of what you're doing today as a consultant and somebody advising companies and groups on how they really, truly operationalize what it is they become and how they leverage all their ability, what's a decision that only you could make and no one else could tell you what to do?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to start off with a thank you. I appreciate, Mike, the invitation. Thank you to Danny if you're listening. I'm excited to be here and share my story and learn more from you as well. Being in inclusion and diversity, that's a lot of what you just addressed. There are no maps. There were no maps. I mean, people have been doing this work around creating stronger cultures and more inclusive, holistic business practices before. Like this existed decades and decades before we actually put a label on it, right?
Right.
But actually, I think what hurt was putting a label on the work. And then suddenly a lot of companies were opening roles. I was in this field before it was labeled. And then it became labeled and it became, how do you design a strategy? What do you do? Whereas before it was pretty kind of embedded or people driven. And then it became design something. So actually when I've been in situations where you had to design a strategy within a few months. You had to report up to your executives within a couple months. What are we going to do? What's going to help drive our culture? How are we going to measure it? And so a lot of what I did was becoming a neutral party and going in on a listening tour. The only way you can really, the way I look at this, the only way you can actually design your map, your strategy, your way forward, your roadmap is by understanding what people want and what directions you could potentially take so that you can gather all those inputs and then design something that aligns with the business and where the business even wants to go. And so that's what's really interesting with something like being in culture work is that it's going to be unique to that place, whatever it is that they're trying to accomplish or build. And so a lot of designing that is making sure that you're gathering inputs that can help design something that's going to be relevant.
So, because it's so interesting to me, and I'd love to hear about your thoughts. Because again, international experience. I was working in Dubai. I was working in Afghanistan and Dubai in 2017, 2018. I remember the first time getting a call from Ernst & Young firm over there. And they were like, they didn't call it diversity and inclusion, but they were saying, you know what, especially in Dubai, they were saying, we have a situation where our head of office we're in Dubai. So everybody goes, oh, they're Emirati. Nope. We're in the office in Dubai. Our lead is from Berlin. We have half our staff, a third of our staff's from Singapore. We have two Americans, a Brit, or whatever. And they were like, but here's the other part. They would put nationalities on things. And they said, we've even tried labeling nationalities only to realize that that doesn't mean anything. And so they were actually talking about, we were talking about Clifton Strengths as a way to try to create understanding and vocabulary, because we were using labels of nations and all these other, and they were saying, we're realizing that to say you're from Singapore could mean a whole different collection of things. To say you're from this place. And it was this understanding of how people come together and find a sense of communal collaboration, which is why I love Demon Strengths work in that. For you, where does this ability come from? Because it's obviously something you're passionate about, as well as have great experience and knowledge in. We always say a strength is when a talent and passion meets knowledge and skill. Where does that come from for you? Where in your story does it source?
There could be a few touch points. First of all, a lot of identifying where people are from is kind of innate. We are tribal as humans. No matter where we yield from, everyone likes
Yeah.
to know, where are you from? And especially in a melting pot like Dubai, everyone's from somewhere else, and so it
Right.
helps people place, oh, okay, you're from Singapore, I'm from here, and then usually travel
Right.
stories arise. I grew up, I guess, the child of immigrants. I always grew up going back and forth to Algeria. Not, I'm North African. Being North African in and of itself is interesting because my blood is super mixed. I have Turkish roots and Arab roots and probably Spanish, French, everything.
Yeah.
But I always grew up seeing the world for what it was. We are all very similar. We all want to put bread on our table and learn and grow and enjoy life. But I also grew up as a child of politics and very, very involved in the community. My father raised us to always give back, always volunteer. And when you grow up with that lens, I see potential in what people can be and what the world can be. And that kind of ended up translating into the work I did because I went into consulting. I went into helping websites be stronger, helping companies with their social media strategy, helping with usability testing.
Yeah.
And so I always had a job that was constantly trying to improve and assist and help. And yeah, I've worked in refugee camps. I've done the international development work. And I've seen some really hard things that you'll never be able to unsee. But to me, that's developed a level of empathy where I translate that to nonprofit support work and corporate culture so that we can, no matter whether it's a micro or macro step, I would still wake up every day making sure I'm doing my part, whatever it is, to
Yeah.
help improve in some way.
Because I was wondering where that, even in what you're saying there, the things you get, the comment, you can't unsee the things you've seen.
Yeah.
We have a foundation called Relentless Foundation. I have some experience in that space. How do you navigate one of your Clifton Strengths themes is responsibility, which is an execution theme, but at its core, responsibility takes psychological ownership for whatever it's involved in. And so it can be a strength and it can also be a burden at times. How do you navigate the boundary of what's my role, what's my responsibility, and not let it go, well, it's not my responsibility where it becomes too distant, but this is what I can show up in. How do you navigate that for yourself?
I love that question, and I love the fact that you're asking that. I'm just going to be candid. Being in inclusion diversity for 10 years was extremely emotionally draining work, right?
Mm.
And I've seen the best and worst in international development, but in D&I, it is not easy. You're constantly in a role of advocacy, of support, of assistance, but no one's filling my cup, right? And so that level of self-care or that level of keeping myself going, the onus
Yeah.
was on me. And I didn't learn that easily.
Mm.
So because I am a very high standard, high bar person. And so my bar for myself was to keep going, keep delivering, keep assisting. And I love the work, but
Yeah.
the sense of responsibility to myself definitely got lost in the process. And to be honest, what was good was that I definitely struggled with burnout, with feeling exhaustion. And that's actually when I was able to take a step back and say, wait, in order for me to show up better for everyone I'm trying to help, I really have to also show that sense of responsibility to myself. And that was not an easy journey. And that was hard when you're managing a team and you're constantly managing up and responding, whether it's national or international affairs, as well as just company and corporate issues.
Mhm.
There's only 24 hours a day in one Sarah. So the
You don't want to
response
be in.
part the responsibility part was hard, and I think any
Yeah.
leader would tell you that. I have no problem taking ownership if I mess up or if I miss something, but it is also exhaustion because you're always running to make sure that you're achieving.
Yeah. Was that a lesson that did you learn it in yourself and that, yeah, the evidence ran out? Did you have people in your life? Was there settings? What what landed got that truth to land that you're like, I need to incorporate this understanding for me?
As the first part was I was actually at a conference and there was a session for leaders. And in that session, they did a closed door session and people started talking about how they were feeling.
Mm,
And it was like it was as if a veil was lifted. I'm like, oh my
mm.
gosh, I feel the same way. And because there's only one or two of us at every company, you're you're often alone.
Yeah.
No one
Yeah.
really understands. People love to tell you what to do or think they know what you do, but they don't really. And then I started realizing I was finding a lot of support and empathy and understanding with peers who were doing similar work, no matter the industry, but had similar
Yeah.
mission and vision. And that was my moment. And so I think it's really important for people to go to spaces where they're going to continue growing, finding their own development tracks, because you end up finding and aligning with people who share that same
Yeah.
direction,
Yeah.
and that really helped me, and then I also started getting feedback from family that, that things needed to change.
Hey, you aren't showing up like the you we know almost sometimes. I hear that quite a bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. So
Yeah. Because I think
sometimes
with this,
when you're on the train and the hamster wheel, you don't really notice,
yeah.
and then
Yeah.
you need to get off the train.
Right, exactly, and the responsibility I mean, responsibility as a theme is so powerful. I mean, they typically they never let people down, they work incredibly hard, they have high capacity. But what can happen too is that space of what I love what you said, is the veil being lifted of, "I am not alone." Because
Yeah.
that responsibility voice under we say, when we're hungry, angry, lonely, tired, that's like a halt. That's
Mm,
when we are the kind of the shadow side of our strengths come out, and it says,
yeah,
"Well, no one else but me. No one else gets this but me." And so I think finding places of common space to go, "Oh, wait, there are other perspectives.
yeah,
I can I can, see myself reflected in other people's
yeah.
voices." So, that's really important. What was
We
the
are
other part that's fascinating? Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
no, no, sorry, I was just gonna say we're actually designed for community,
Yeah.
and I saw this a lot doing this kinda work. People wanted a buddy at work. They wanted a community, and that's what's really important is to have, that work spouse or people you can lean on and talk to.
Yeah.
We're designed for it. We're not designed not to have community.
I mean, Gallup talks a lot, and that Gallup has their Q12 employee
Right.
engagement. One of the critical questions is, do you have a best friend at work?
Yeah.
But but something you just said is so critical, and I think about the rest of your profile, which is we're designed for community. And I think, and when I look at your themes, right? We've got achiever, we got strategic, ID, we got input. Those are problem solving, thinking, delivering, analytical. I think it's fascinating to me that would you agree with the statement that when it comes to creating relationship organizations that are healthy and relational and connecting and people are finding the tools to do the job that allows diversity of opinion, while it sounds relational and very human, it requires action and things that are not relational. It requires
Uh,
research and planning and what your word was, design. Would you
yeah.
find that's true? But we disconnect that. We think it's so. I find leaders will talk about feelings, and I'm like, no, no, no. Make hard choices. Like talk to the Sarahs who
Yeah.
are about what's responsible and planned.
Yeah. There's such a no, again, I'm really glad you brought this up, Mike. Designing any strategy, you have to really look at the systems that you're going to put in place, the boundaries, right? The parameters.
Yeah,
And it doesn't matter whether you're designing a product or you're trying to design a culture where people can thrive. I love Peter Drucker's statement, culture eats strategy for breakfast.
right.
And this is always what I led with, despite the fact it's overused, is that you will not be able to design anything that's going to really go strong if people are burnt out, morale is
Mhm.
low, they don't trust each other. There's no psychological safety. And so a
Right.
lot of this work is around creating those systems and helping hone in behaviors. But that, if you peel back the layer, goes back to, well, what's the culture like now? Is there trust? Is there psychological safety? Yes, no, why not? Right. Um, a lot of people think that people go into this work because, oh, it's passionate. Oh, you're
Mhm.
this or you're that. It actually has nothing to do with passion. You will fail if it's about passion. You have to have
Mhm.
a strategic lens. You have to know, what the consequences are. You have to understand how to build a strategy, and then you have to know how to measure it and then scale it. And
Yeah.
that's where I've seen, sadly, why D&I has failed a lot is because people did not come in with a strategic lens. It's not just trainings. Trainings, there's no results with trainings, right? You have to take time, you have to be patient and really understand the root of what you're trying to accomplish and how you
Yeah.
start doing micro actions to get there.
'Cause, it's so it's paradoxical to most people that the planning and strategic thinking are the parts that are required. But I think you have to have a vision of the value of diversity. You have to have a vision of the value of equity and the variety of things. But the odd understanding of that, I was having to do, Jeep Grand Cherokee. They had a murder suicide in a plant this is a decade ago now, and they were like, "Hey, we're gonna change leadership. Could you come in?" And so I spent a year and a half working with them, and I learned everything there is to know about building Grand Cherokees. And they're like, "Oh, yeah, there's over 55 different versions of a Grand Cherokee or a Dodge Durango you could build." And someone's like, "The assembly line is 3.5 miles long ultimately, and there's 1.2 million parts that have to land at the exact right spot in order for the person to reach for the thing that creates the diversified product."
Uh-huh.
And as I started thinking about diversity and inclusion, like I'm going, yeah, I'm like, this is what it is where companies are going, we need to have different outputs of our service or product or thing.
Yeah.
We've got to have people reach for the tools that fit whatever their needs are to do the thing to meet that product need.
Yeah.
And but it required this level of planning of the right part had to be in the right spot because every 47 seconds, the assembly line part, the system would move on. And people would separate out how emotionally frustrated it was for people when the
Yeah.
right tools weren't available. And I feel
Yeah.
like the DEI gets in this place of like, oh, it's about everything from the political spectrum to us making allowances for different levels of poor performance when it's exactly the opposite, I felt like.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they are a strong company for those considerations, right? If companies are not considering these kind of variables, you're missing out on potential, actually on revenue
Yeah.
stream, right?
Yeah.
So you can't just design one product
Right.
so that
Right.
you and I are going to probably need different shampoos, different everything. Like
Right.
you
Right.
can't just design one
Totally.
product. You
No.
have to design for the diversity and the diverse needs
Yeah.
that we each have.
Yeah.
So,
And I think that's the realization is that
right.
I think most companies fail to realize that unless your client is monoculture and they all want the exact same product, you're gonna need diverse opinions internally and diverse
Yeah.
experiences. There's like, I
Yeah.
mean, some old,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'll share a story with you. So I
Yeah.
was launching trainings globally, and I had a leader call me from a Scandinavian country and said, "We're not going to attend this. We have no diversity at our office. We don't need to attend this training."
Mhm.
And I was like, "Okay, I understand. Nothing is mandatory. At least where I was working, nothing was mandatory." And I said, "But um, tell me a little bit about the age range in your office. Tell me a little bit about neurodiversity, different generation, parents."
Yeah.
And then everybody ended up showing up because this leader paused and was like, "Oh, yeah." I'm like, "You have diversity. Just because you're all from one country does not mean that you don't want to learn about this thing called unconscious bias or even just learn about one another." And I've dealt with this discussion in a lot of countries that, as you just said, think that they're one, but the reality is within quote unquote one, you've got so much to unpack right there within our
Yeah.
identities.
Yeah. They said the language of, yeah, unspoken bias, decision making. So even with Clifton Strengths, we talk about your Clifton Strengths themes give you a lens on how you communicate, how you collaborate, and how you prioritize solutions. And so we'll say you can look at the exact same information. How many times have you been in a meeting where you look at the exact same information and come to the opposite conclusion? Well, our first thought is one of us is wrong and it's not me. Our second thought is if you liked me, you would agree with me. If you think I'm good at my job, you agree with me. But like what I love, like in your profiling, for example, analytical is really unique in your profile to have analytical and woo in the same conversation. And so even I can sit here and talk and tell stories, but when I teach, I find that analytical is like, that's a nice anecdote. Where are the facts?
Mhm,
Like analytical wants the sources of the data.
mhm,
What's the exact research that says the Clifton strengths are dominant at the age of 15 versus
mhm.
whatever? Like there's an element of that. And that diversity is about everything from opinion to life experience to culture. It isn't simply the physical disabilities or the emotional or whatever we slap a label on.
Yeah.
Teams that are thinking, we find lack of Clifton Strengths lack of planned diversity of Clifton Strengths themes, we would say. Not that it's not definitely not DEI category. That alone will show you how much gap. Take that and then multiply it by 1,000 other experiences.
Yeah.
We see it happen all the time.
Yeah.
It's such a when you think about that mix of, because you are not only a consultant and advisor and you've created systems, you
Mhm.
are also a speaker. You're a
Mhm.
person who's trying to shape thought.
Mhm.
And there's something I do, the fact that you have woo, which is mass communication, and analytical, which is like, I would say, it's the ability to be compelling, but actually have facts. For you, how does the journey you're on in this next phase being shaped? When we think about what it is, the impact you want to have, do any of these themes of ownership of hard work, of strategic idea, strategic and input, like thinking, analytical, being right, what is some of the legacy you're trying to shape next in your career?
Yeah. I appreciate the question. I'm definitely in a state of transition right now. And I know that my North Star is constantly impact and purpose.
Mhm.
Even in between jobs in the past, I found myself volunteering and doing things that kind of fed my soul.
Yeah.
I'm very intentional. And the woo part of me is because I get a lot of energy from people, but I
Mhm.
love being around people and kind of like you, Mike, I enjoy hearing people's stories.
Sure.
And I love creating a space where people feel heard and seen. And I didn't really realize I was constantly doing this. So the woo part of me is wanting to pull out people's stories and
Yeah.
learn from them. There's a bit of like me wanting to learn from them. But
Mhm.
I do believe that every single one of our 8.5 billion people around the world have a story to tell. And I'm constantly humbled by that. But the analytical part is kind of the curious,
Yeah.
nerdy Sarah who loves to come out. I am a learner. I'm curious, and I'm always
Yeah.
want to understand why. Why is this happening? What can we do? How do I turn this to work? How can I translate this? So right now
Mhm.
I'm really thinking about what does impact look like in this fast-paced world, right? Whether
Mhm.
it's going to be AI and tech for good and where do I play in that space? And so I am
Mhm.
learning a lot when it comes to technology we can be doing to leverage that as leaders so that we make sure that we are using tech for good. So that's kind
Mhm.
of the space that I want to play. Because when you look at business trends right now, it is going to be a lot about how are we augmenting our people? How are we still treating our people? As well as making sure that we're keeping up with the fast paced developments. So I think it's really important today to see holistic, take a step back and
Yeah.
understand what are the business trends, what are the people trends, and see what we can do together. So that's kind of how I'm looking at my next step is
When
very
when you
thoughtfully.
when you look at that and think about who's doing that well, who inspires you right now as you're picking through and you're reading and learning about AI and tech for good? Are there initiatives or projects that you're going, this seems to be something that I think, man, I think there's legs there. I think there's a future in that space that we should keep our eye on them because they're doing, like you said, tech for good in the right way.
So it's an interesting point because it's too soon to tell.
Hmm.
I just read an article a week ago saying how a lot of companies had lied about their numbers, or we thought that they were doing well when it comes to AI development. Really,
Exactly.
over 70% of companies are not designing AI strategies, right? They think that they're going to be efficient, more productive, but they're not. And so it actually likens to when D&I became a thing about 10 years ago, was that we were rushing to implement without being thoughtful and intentional about it.
Hmm.
I'm definitely seeing that now. Most nonprofits I talk to, for example, are too afraid to step into and don't even have the resources to go into any
Right.
form of AI orchestration and management. And then
Yep.
big companies are also scrambling and adding that layer on top of full time roles.
Yeah.
So, designing your AI governance, we're not seeing,
Yeah.
we have no one to really look at. And so we're in this interesting time right now where everyone's playing and everyone's talking about what they're doing, but there isn't, that North Star to look at and say, they nailed it. But I do think we're going to see that in a couple years. Um,
Yeah, because it isn't there's because the conversation is pretty interesting. I mean, even in the news right now, we have this conversation about Anthropic refusing to let
right.
the Department of Defense. I refuse to call it the Department of War, even though they are going to war all the time. The Department of Defense to use Anthropic models because of autonomous weapons and mass surveillance. Like, and that kind of got some traction. Meanwhile, OpenAI scoops in and jumps in that space behind it. I think there's those kind of concepts. There's people that are, we advise as a firm, we advise some tech startups and things like that who have sold themselves as AI, but are still trying to just bootstrap it internally and not real strategy. What's interesting for us is that I'm finding that it's the people who realize the future technology has to enable my humanity. Like I really encourage coaches, like Clifton Strengths is a tool we use, and it works really well with AI tools. So if you're following along and you want to, it's open source, right? It's Gallup's information,
Mm.
34 well-defined themes, great tools out there. You can drop it into Claude or ChatGPT, and it'll give you, like a coach, some elements. So I tell my coaches, hey, just so you know, don't actually use it to come up with questions. But here's what you can use with AI, though, because it kind of dulls your own ability to ask questions. I
Yeah.
said, but here's the thing, you can find better ways to communicate with your client in between. You can gather up more resources. You can find articles that fit them. You can enhance the relationship by using tools along the side. But I worry that we're replacing our humanity instead of enhancing our humanity with it and finding a ways to come alongside it.
Yeah. It's definitely a concern. I mean, the amount of layoffs we're seeing and companies trying to figure out how do they restructure, and there's so much volatility and uncertainty right now in the economy and in the world. And so it almost feels easier to just bring in a technology
Yeah,
than, manage people, right?
yeah,
They always say, and I've seen this across my career, that morale is up when stocks are doing well, but there's so much volatility. Morale is fluctuating everywhere.
yeah,
And so, but I don't think we have enough people who understand the technology. And to your point, the companies that we trust keep changing. And one thing I'm finding is that I'm overwhelmed by how many products there are. I
yeah,
was trying to build an AI agent the other day, and there's so many tools I could use, so many ways to go about it. So when you already have so much going on at work, around you, personally and professionally, I think creating the mind share to really understand what you're doing is really important, to be very intentional about that.
yeah. I think knowing, especially with the, again, you have responsibility in your themes, the ability to go, what's the end and what are you
Yes.
working back from? Like, hey,
Yeah.
what's the consequences we're wanting to get out of it?
Yes, you have to look at the risk. You have to look at the consequences
Mhm.
and what's the outcome. And I
Yeah.
don't think we know the answer. I think, and it keeps changing. I mean, no one last October could have predicted OpenClaw and Claude Code that just came out in
Mhm.
January,
Right.
right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And
So
co-work and all that. It's crazy. It's it's the game changer as far as these as the access is changing and the risks of those things. But what's interesting too is this idea of when it comes to our future as individuals and people, how do we it's that when I talk about the compass, I would say your strengths are kind of like your bottom, it's like your talents there. And then there's what you could do with your talent, which is your purpose. The last one on the place is that what it is you actually are passionate about and where your values come from.
yeah.
Is that there's a values conversation that I think has to occur in some of those places. And I
Mhm.
and I wonder how much companies, especially when you're consulting and thinking about that, does that conversation get included? In that, if a value is something that's not negotiable, a preference is something you prefer, but you negotiate it. Because if you can get what you prefer, most times you do, but you recognize you can't always get your preferences. A value is something I must have. But what's interesting is I feel like it's getting harder and harder to find companies that understand values other than let us survive and have enough revenue to do whatever we want.
Yeah, I mean, this is such a sore subject for me. I'll tell you, I think Amazon did a really good job. When I worked there, we lived and breathed our values.
Mm,
We lived and breathed our leadership principles. Other companies might have these values splattered on walls, but they may not embed them in their speech or in their
yeah,
ways of work. Very few companies really get living by values. And I think what we're seeing now is not only a value of the company, but also the values of how you're going to integrate AI and AI governance in that. Those might be different values.
mhm,
So for example, if a company focuses on like, oh, integrity, do the right thing, what does that mean with AI? Right? That could you have to put
mhm,
strong guardrails around AI and privacy. And so we need to be more careful and clear about our values and make sure that the AI values as well as the people values are aligned. And I think that we would all have stronger companies if they actually lived by their values and not just splatter them on walls, but use them.
yeah,
And after D&I took a hit last January in 2025, and all those images came out of companies removing their values and
Yeah.
crossing out words like integrity, what does that what message does that send to people if we no longer believe in integrity or curiosity? That I am concerned about kind of tying it back to your, the map analogy, Mike. Like,
Yeah.
where are we going? Like, what's
Right.
the end result if you're not living by values and if you don't want to stand by these certain things? Then what do you stand for?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's so that lack of clarity on our own values. It's not even a matter of being frustrated with ourselves that, oh gosh, well, hey, we should feel guilty and bad that we're not living up to them. But I often say, if you don't have, I think I talk about one of the chapters of the book. It's this idea of I can give you directions on how to get to San Diego, but the starting point is critical because the directions don't work without the right starting
Right.
point.
Yes, exactly. Where are you
And so
starting?
I don't think, I think I'm getting more and more concerned that people are struggling to tell the truth to themselves about where they are.
Yeah, they
It's our
want to.
inability to judgment free look at ourselves and say, here's where I am. And my values cause me to want to grow, but I'm growing from here and not growing from here because I'm actually at this ground level.
I think this is happening to us on many layers. We are not thinking critically. We're losing, think about it. You and I grew up probably remembering our friends' phone numbers.
Completely.
We did not have maps. Like, I would have to open the car, thing and pull out this
The
huge
thing.
map for my
Yes.
dad. Like, we used our senses,
Yeah.
but now, I mean, I can't even go 3 blocks without, like, okay, am I going left or right? We're not
Right.
thinking like we used to, and this atrophy that we're gonna experience now with AI is concerning,
Yeah.
because I don't think people are gonna ask themselves deep questions. We're gonna be surviving versus thriving. That's my concern.
Yeah. I've referenced this before because I think I think I have on a different episode, but it just
Mhm,
stands out to me so much. There was a study of breast cancer doctors in Poland who
mhm,
were spotting breast cancer on X-rays and in lab results at a tune of like 70+%, like 75%, amazing. And they found a piece of software they could come in, they taught them how to use it, and they were able to increase the ability of spotting breast cancer in patients up to like a 95% level, which
nice.
was significant and amazing, and
Mhm,
obviously a sign of doing good. They took the software away for 6 months and said, hey, we're going to retweak it and then relaunch it with you. Just go back to your normal patterns. Don't worry. And they went back to the process they'd had the previous 6 months. And instead of dropping back to 70+%, they dropped to like 40
wow.
because the atrophication of not using it with the tool
Yeah,
actually decreased that fundamental ability. And I think this is part of our challenge is that the ability to see the value in other people, again, D&I,
mhm, mhm.
diversity of opinion, the diversity of degrees, the diversity of experiences, finding a way to say, am I using the tools to augment and really deliver something, or am I using it to replace myself?
I think
It's a
some
different
people
conversation.
are okay with that. Um, I think
Yeah,
it depends on generations.
yeah,
So,
true,
yeah,
but it's true. But
yeah,
it's fun. But I mean, it's really interesting though.
yeah,
There's a client of mine that I know, a client from way back that they do think tank. They're basically a social think
okay,
tank.
nice.
They solve social problems. They do some advisory work and things like that. For like governments, like the state of Illinois forms of how you
Mhm,
get financial aid for everything from power to whatever. The younger and it's interesting that they have a younger and younger staff, and one of the challenges is AI adoption.
mhm,
Interesting that because they're so human centric. They're a human
mhm,
centric design
um,
firm that wants to solve problems for people.
mhm,
So people in the center. Simultaneously, though, they feel the frustration of being asked by their leadership to use AI tools because it
yeah,
feels like it's counter to the values of putting people
totally.
first.
Mhm.
But yet they're falling behind and not getting bids to solve problems because they're not moving fast enough because they're not using the tools.
Yeah, there's a happy medium.
And there's a happy medium. I think it's a challenge on that space. And I think
Mhm,
when you if you could craft that space for yourself in that
yeah,
when you think about the legacy of trying to do of being a playing a part on a team that wants to use tech
mhm,
for good,
mhm,
as you evolve, is there other segments? I mean, because I mean, ResMed is a corporate company that makes medical devices.
mhm,
Amazon is a global infrastructure of delivery. You've been in Riyadh working with women, like you've done, like you've done
yeah,
global spaces. How
mhm.
for you, and you're going to magnify and catalyze things in the world. How do you set that course? at this phase of your life between going, look, I want roles. I'm a consultant and I can do work and things like that. But I would love to have more and more impact as a professional in these spaces. How do you set that? Because strategic responsibility can do almost anything. Like you
Yeah.
can solve problems in a setting. How
Yeah.
do you, speaking to the values conversation, decide where you want to leave your footprints?
Yeah. I've been struggling a little bit with that. There's a lot of things that I care about, and to your point, I've had like a very rich life. I've lived and worked in many different countries, and um I know how I want it to feel.
Mm,
And I think that's really important. A lot of times, we can get lost in a title
yeah.
or a job description, but to be honest, it's like I find myself really open to what's coming my way and to how the world is changing. The world is changing.
Mhm.
Nonprofits have different needs, foundations are approaching things differently, and honestly, companies are scaling back how they support and also how they hire or how they show up in their communities. So I've launched kind of a small consulting company called Effective Immediately, and I'm offering just different leadership trainings, different coaching, helping you kind of design those high performance
Mhm.
teams, really helping you think about whether it's cultural awareness, cultural competency, cultural
Yeah.
respect, and then also elements of psychological safety and inclusive leadership. And then there's the other part where if it's facilitation or speakers. So I know that I have a lot to offer on this deep lens, but I'm trying to figure out what companies need. And so
Yeah.
I'm actually in a discovery phase because there's so much shifting going on, and I think it would
Yeah.
be a disservice to define that right now. So I'm trying to actually be malleable and then kind of see where it lands. But I know again that it's gonna be a role that is gonna be driving some sort of
Mhm.
change internally, and I'm excited for that. I'm excited for what's to come. It's just too soon to tell.
Yeah, but I think you are onto something though in this, in the especially in the trainings that you provide and the consulting and the speaking of psychological safety and the elements is that one of the things that we do is we do leadership launch assessments for companies
Mhm.
that are investing in other companies. But I was meeting with a company that all they do is they do tech stack installation for venture capitals. So
Mhm.
VCs are going to put money into a company, they come with a tech stack. And I was saying to them, I said, okay, great. So a company is going to invest because they want 30% more efficiency by embedding AI. I said, real quick, are they sure the leadership team knows how to manage a team of human beings who just lost 30% of their friends? And they were like, nobody's asking the question yet, Mike. They're
Yeah.
just thinking about the efficiency. So what you're describing
Yeah.
is the absolute need, along with the tech, is going, people are changing their relationship to their leads and the people they
Yeah.
think they look up to who mentor and advocate for them. Who is
Yeah.
training these new leaders to lead in a world where tech is a member of the team?
Yeah, I actually love working with leaders, but whether it's layoffs or M&A, there's a
Mm,
lot of questions that get overlooked. So you can't just acquire a company and just move forward. The culture
right.
work is number one, and I have not. It's very hard. Let's just say that to get that right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Business schools spend classes and classes on this. Companies that grow through M&A rarely see the actual profit, quote unquote, when it comes to the
Yeah.
people integration and the tech integration too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I actually love that space because some of my happy moments in my career have been watching the light bulbs go off for leaders
Mhm.
or watching leaders evolve. You can have a title, doesn't mean you know how to lead. And that's
Yeah.
a beautiful spot is if you and I are in a space where we get to empower and really
Yeah.
help people, inspire and motivate their people.
Yeah. And because what you're talking about is that ability to, you really are bringing an ability to de-risk the leadership investment.
Yes.
Because but when you ask, if when I ask guys in the private equity space, they're like, you know what? Our analysis is so good now with tech. Our
Mhm.
market analysis is so great. We know the finances. We know the tech we want. We have not yet figured out how to de-risk leadership. And I know that, and even as what you're talking about, the stability it requires to stabilize that team after investment, to hire the right team, the planning, but like what you're talking about is a key piece.
Yeah.
And I think there's going to be a great space for it. I wonder what it'll take for them to be aware of their need
Yeah.
in
That's
some way.
kind of going back to the responsibility thing you asked earlier. A lot of you don't know what you don't know, and that's something I noticed a
Right.
lot with leaders is you don't know to de-risk if you don't really think there is a risk to begin with,
Yeah.
right? So that's
Well,
it takes experience or something to happen, sadly, for
yeah.
leaders to kind of take a step back and say, "Okay, we wanna make sure we do this right."
Yeah. Because that's, I mean, one of your, as you think about before I'm gonna steal your time this morning, but there's an old marketing guy named Seth Godin from years and years ago,
No big deal. Yeah, I've met him. Yeah.
right? I've not met him. He's brilliant. I mean, I love his stuff, right? Purple
Yeah.
Cow,
He's
remember?
great.
But I think
Mhm.
he was the one who used to say, nobody goes to the hardware store to buy a drill. They go to the hardware store to buy a hole, right? You
Yeah.
want to hang the painting on the wall, so you need to drill the hole. So you go to the hardware store. Nobody wants a drill. And I feel, and my concern and my hope for the work you've done, DI and beyond, is that we started selling people the world's greatest drills in hardware store, but not actually telling them, like, hey, wait, what is it you actually want?
It's
We
the
didn't do the
output.
question of, like, hey, by the way, you didn't need diversity and inclusion because of diversity and inclusion. You needed it because you needed to have a variety of tools. You needed you need to be able to hold multiple things in that space. I think there's something about what you're doing of even what you just said of how do I help people find the words, which is why I love the thoughts of you talk when you speak and when you do consulting and workshops, is that giving them the language with that woo and responsibility and analytical so they know actually I might need a drill for 5 different things, but the reason number 1 is I need to put a hole in my wall to hang up this light.
I love that quote. And tying it back to strategy, when someone designs a strategy, they have to say, what does good look like? That's just like one of your first few slides. What's the
Right.
problem? What does good look like? What's the risk if we don't do this work? And when
Right.
you start digging into that, then you're going to start understanding what exactly the strategy is. Okay, well, the risk is if we don't do this work, then we might design a machine that's only designed for 6 foot for X people,
Yeah.
right? Like you have to really
Yeah.
think deeply and take time. Um,
Yeah.
but what does good look like? I think it's overlooked and
Yeah.
holistically across the business.
Yeah. And empowering leaders to, and that's, I think you have to empower, and I think it takes someone like you, especially with the confidence of partnering with somebody who helps me define what good looks like. I told somebody the other day, when did we all become allergic to making decisions?
Yeah, right.
The
That's a
number
decision. No decision. It's so bad.
they won't, and instead of saying, I'm just like, why don't you decide? Well, I don't want to be wrong. Or how do I know it's the right thing? Or how do I know? And I'm going, I got an idea. Take a risk. Step
Yeah,
in.
you're
This is what good
afraid.
looks like. But at the very least, we now know what we can ping against. We can have a conversation and we can pivot
Yeah.
and we can revise and we can iterate. But would somebody please own, hey, we think this is what good looks like for our customers, for our
Mhm.
market, for our team. And defining that with
Yeah.
some courage, because then we can really measure. If we can't ever define it, we can then reverse engineer. Well, we're better than we were. Or compared to so and so, we're great.
This is where I'm concerned about with AI, actually. Like, don't get me wrong, I use AI every day, but
Sure.
that level of decision making and courage, now it's like, well, we'll just ask AI to do it. AI will, AI told me to do this, or I'm having a
Yeah.
problem, and so that courage, I
Yeah.
wonder what's going to happen with that in the workplace because no one wants to take responsibility if things go wrong.
Yeah.
So
And
I
it's,
find it,
it's that
to be honest, like, all right, I didn't do well, but I learned.
I And I think there's something in it. Somebody said the other day, Willem Dafoe was being interviewed, and he said, it's really actually hard to fail at a thing. Well, everybody
Mm,
worries about failing. He's like, what if you went into every take and every approach going, well, I'm pretty sure I have to fail 5 times, basically, he
mm,
said. And you're like, I'm going to go try to fail right now. Let me get my 5 failures out of the way. Let me proactively try to fail and show the courage of taking action that way
yeah.
in an effort to go, this is the strategies we need.
Uh-huh.
This is what we've learned, and not be afraid of learning things.
It builds confidence, what you just described. One
Yeah.
after another builds so much confidence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're I'm excited that I know you're doing consulting right now, and so there's a lot of varieties, but I'm excited that more people get to hear your voice. We're gonna make sure we share all
Oh,
your
thank
links and
you.
things like that. So you're gonna want to check out Sarah's TEDx talk, by the way. We're gonna put those links in there. But I mean, Sarah, I love this conversation. And as it progresses, I'd love to chat with you more sometime to kind of
Thank
hear what
you.
you're seeing in
Likewise.
the market space.
Thank you. I appreciate it. This has been such a great conversation. I appreciate Mike you giving me the time.
I appreciate being here. For those of you following along, it matters to us. All the little things they say: the like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. That's important. But here's the other thing too. I always say my mom and her 5 friends love this podcast, so we're excited you're there. This is really just created because we want you to actually feel like other people. To Sarah's comment earlier, you're not alone. People have other thoughts and fears, and you can figure out using your strengths how to create a compass for yourself. Want to let you know about something that all you requires is your top 5. If you're taking Clifton Strengths, we created a thing called the Fit Forum, and it's a link here. You can sign up, go in there, and it's just a whole bunch of people who some are leaders, some aren't looking for jobs, not looking for jobs. But it's this idea of use your top 5 as a way to figure out a better fit for the major areas of your life, from health and finance to social to recharging. And we use Clifton Strengths, but you can actually get courses in there. There's some videos. A lot of it's free. There's different tiers. If you want to sign up to be a navigator, you could. But I really think you could find something of use. You click on that link, bring your top 5 Clifton Strengths themes, sign up. We'd love to have you join us out there. Sarah, thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks, you guys. See you next time.